I just started the recording just so we have
Good.
that going. I wasn't sure that or wasn't realizing on that last session last week that we were supposed to initiate our own recording. I thought that might have been something that was done for us.
Nope, no, we have to do it ourselves. So I'm glad that you did it. Um, and I think Andy, you're muted. Could you unmute yourself?
Oh, yes, sorry.
There you go. And Steve or Jim, yeah, there you go. Andy, I think you're the only student.
No, am I?
Yeah. So
But what do you want to
get-
know?
Yeah, you get everybody's undivided attention. So
Well, this is my year 3 as treasurer, so I don't have a whole lot questions. So
That's perfectly fine. I think, we'll just go through a little bit of an agenda and we'll see where that takes us. Starting out, let me see if I can share my screen here.
I'm gonna head over to the president's. If you need me, just send me a quick text.
All right.
Okay, let's see if I can bring back my session here. You can see the agenda that I have on the screen.
yeah, I can, yes.
Okay. So what we had done last time, Jim and I were asked to run these sessions on treasurer training and share maybe our experiences, and we'd certainly like to hear your experiences as well. So we're going to start out with just some basic introductions, which just, tell us a little bit about how long you've been a Lion and what you maybe hope to glean from the session tonight. We'll talk a little bit about the activity administrative accounts in case there's any questions on that. Maybe, discuss what process or what softwares you use to record your account transactions. Are there any things you do online, such as maybe using Square or other apps for taking payments, things like that? What do you do with sending out dues notices, and also just, what do you tell your clubs during your meetings as far as presenting a treasurer's report? So Andy, if you would like to start, just tell us a little bit about how long you've been a Lion and what you hope maybe to glean from tonight.
Okay, I've been a Lion. I'm trying to think when I officially became a Lion. I want to say it was it would have been 2014. So I've been a Lion for 8 years. And kind of what I've hoped to gain tonight would just be, I'm more of a digital person, so the hand check register is always a pain for me. That's something I'd like to digitize, where it just be a bit easier and accessible and not always have to record everything in a small little check register.
Okay. All right. Jim, do you want to tell Andy a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've been a Lion about as long as you have. I don't know. I never looked up to see exactly what year, but it's 8 or 9 years. The very first year I came in, because I had an accounting background, they asked me to be treasurer right away. So I was treasurer to start right off. And I actually took over for a gentleman that used to be treasurer of another foundation that I'm also on the board on. And I took over for treasurer after him also. So both times I was familiar with how he kept the books manually, and both times I put him onto QuickBooks. That was one of the first things I did. And I think it's worth the transition. If you don't know QuickBooks, it isn't that hard to learn. But the nice thing about QuickBooks with keeping it is you can keep both the administrative account and the activity account as 2 separate companies. So they're totally separate. and you have a history of exactly what happened. So anybody that wants to see anything can go back and see everything. So I think that's the huge advantage, at least I see, in setting up we also set up a foundation after I started there so that we take all of our project and fundraising and it all goes through the foundation. So that also makes it easier if people want to donate. We haven't had a lot of donations that way, but it keeps the door open. We're a 501c3. So, and I was treasurer for about 4 or 5 years. Then I got out of it and got into the third vice role. And then our treasurer that was there was only a treasurer for a year. Next treasurer resigned from the club, so I took it over again. So now I'm second vice and treasurer. So luckily we've got somebody new coming in next year, so I won't have to do both jobs again.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jim. A little bit about myself. I've been a Lion since 2008. I've been treasurer for about the past 7 years. When I first started with Lions, I was a tail twister and just kind of worked my way up to various positions. But when our longtime treasurer passed away back in, I think, 2012 it was, we had another club member take over as treasurer. And then when the presidency opened up, he took the presidency and I took his job as treasurer. So that's kind of how I fell into the role and have been doing that ever since. So that's a little bit of background on my membership. So to start with, just kind of going through our agenda a little bit, first wanted to find out, Andy, if you had any specific questions about the differences between the administrative and the activities budgets, what kind of transactions and things go into each. How is your understanding of that?
Well, ours is all set up on an Excel document and it's all broken down in categories that says this is what it goes in the administration budget and then this is the activities budget. So it's just separated that way.
Okay. Did you have any questions about being uncertain about where to sometimes deposit monies that your club has taken in, or do you think your understanding of that is pretty solid?
It's getting better, and there's older Lions that have helped me with that. And when we do kind of our year end, I always put comments in there. So if I do have a number in there, then they will say like, oh, well, this is actually would go into here. So yeah, it's been working, and I continue to learn each year more and more where things are supposed to go. But yeah, otherwise I don't have any questions.
Okay, yeah, it's certainly how I learned as well. Our secretary, our longtime secretary, Jim Fletcher, has been a very good mentor for me, especially the first few years, helping me to learn where things go. In general, the thing that it took me a while to learn is that any money that comes from your club members exclusively goes into that administrative account. So your dues and the tail twisting and things like that. Whereas for the activities budget, if there's any kind of public money coming in, then that money goes to the activities budget. And Jim, I think it was you that pointed out last time about some fundraiser that you were doing, or maybe one of the clubs was doing, where you thought it belonged in administrative, but you eventually learned that because there was some public money coming in, that it all had to go to activities. Is that correct?
Yeah, we used to run, well, our club's golf outing used to be 80% Lions and 20% from the public. So the way they used to account for it before I came in was 80% of it went to the activities budget, or 80% went to the administrative budget because it came from Lions. The other 20% went to activities. And I said, no, I found the manual. It was the USA Canada Forum accounting manual that they handed out. in there actually has a golf outing as an example. If you have one person from the public in your golf outing, everything has to go into the activities budget. You can't split it up on a ratio basis or anything. So I think that was a little eye-opening for our club. And now every time they want to run some project, they want to do something, they immediately look to me. What do you think, Jim? Is this something that's going to be ours? And I think it's pretty simple. If we don't have the public, if it's just our club, they can go administrative. If we got anybody at all, it has to go activities. So that to me is the easy answer to everything that we get asked. So.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on that topic? Okay. Next thing, just recording account transactions. Jim had mentioned earlier that he uses QuickBooks for his club. For our club, I use Excel. I'm very, very comfortable in Excel. And when I took over as treasurer, we were still doing transactions in a ledger and writing them by hand. It sounded like, Andy, that was a little bit about what you're doing. I just took the last, what's that?
Yeah, yep, that was, yeah, I was just starting
Okay.
clearing my throat.
Okay, and what I decided to do was I went through the ledger and I entered in several years of transactions that were prior to me taking over, so that I would at least have a record of, what kinds of things went into each account. And then I started entering in my own transactions going forward. And like you, Andy, I use a lot of cell comments and things like that, so I can remind myself where a deposit might have come from, whether it's member dues or what have you. I also use the column out in the right-hand side for balancing my accounts. So when I get the bank statements downloaded offline, or online, I should say, I use that for making sure that I'm balanced before every meeting each month. And so I have a separate tab for administrative. I have a separate tab for activity, and they're both set up pretty much the same way. I have a column for which items have cleared at the bank and which ones haven't. So that's just one way that I do my accounts. Andy, what are you currently doing? Are you currently using Excel to some degree, or is it still all in the ledger?
Yeah, no, I'm using Excel to do like the statements. I just don't have it access online to Microsoft. I don't have 365 on my phone or anything, so I just end up putting in that later. So like I do the ledger by hand at the bank as I'm depositing it, and then at the end of each month, then I plug it all into Excel.
Oh, okay. Because one option might be to consider Google Sheets, which is
That's
free.
what yeah. Yep. That's what I'm thinking I'm going to do, is switch it over to there, and then that way I can just do everything right from my phone as I'm sitting in the bank and do all that stuff right there and not have to worry about that.
Sure. Jim, what are some of the advantages you think of using QuickBooks?
I think, billing is easy in QuickBooks because everybody's set up a separate account, so you can email out a mass billing, so everybody gets it in an email. Everybody is in a customer file, so we don't have to have spreadsheets for each individual line and who's paid. It's all tracked in the software. To actually buy QuickBooks, there is a site, if you're a nonprofit, to go and buy. QuickBooks is fairly expensive software, but if you're a nonprofit to go buy it, it's like, I want to say it's $45 to buy a license. So you can get it really cheap, and it makes it economical to go ahead and run it. And I mean, I've got every contractor we've used, every activity we have has a separate account for it. So I can track what each activity has done in the past, what it does in the future when we go to budget. So it makes, to me, it makes the accounting so simple, because anybody that asks a question about anything, I can run a report and give them the numbers right off the bat. I don't have to look it up and calculate it. So it did take me a little time, because I went back like Steve did. I went back, took a few years worth of activity and loaded it in. So we had a history. So that took me a little time because we're a club with 100 members. So we have a fair amount of activity that takes place, but it sure made it easy after that to be able to go back and look at reports. And even banking, we get to the next one. It's like when you got QuickBooks, we can take payments through QuickBooks online. And so we pay a fee just like you would with Square, but we don't have to use Square. We just use the QuickBooks payments. We still use Square for when we do activities like the golf outing and stuff to take payments. But we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the members to pay. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm hoping to look into for our club a little bit more is making payments easier. Right now, payments are all made by check, and they either mail me their check or more frequently, they just give me their check at a monthly meeting, and I make the deposits from there. But we certainly have had some of our younger, more computer adept members ask why can't we do this online and what have you. And I think I've just resisted it because it's so much easier for me to track a check and all of that. But I'm certainly looking at maybe trying to figure out an easier way for us to do our dues as well.
And I'm treasurer of our homeowners association too. And our homeowners, we have a pretty high population of Indians from India in our area, and a lot of them don't even have checking accounts. So they're like, how do I pay you by check when I don't have a checking account? So they have to go get a money order or whatever. And so I finally started letting them pay online. It got a whole lot more people to pay on time. Now, of course, that's not the same makeup as the Lions Club, but the same type of thing happens. I think people just get used to paying everything online. They kind of forget about checks. But
Andy, how do you go about getting fees and dues paid from your members?
Same way that you do. Our Lions Club is relatively older clientele, and so they're just members and like in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I would say over 50% of our club is in that range. And then the other, I was the youngest Lion until we had one of my Leos become a Lion this year. So she's now the youngest Lion at 22. But prior to that, like it was always, I was the youngest by, 10 years. And so now that I'm treasurer, I've just been kind of going with what they've done in the past, and that's fine with me. It's I just track everything on an Excel document of who's paid their dues and who hasn't, and just
how
update
often do you
that.
bill for dues?
What's that?
How often do you bill for dues? You do it once a year, twice a year, quarterly?
We at the beginning of the year, and then we try to, and then it's usually we get majority of them. I'd say we get about 90% of them in the first quarter, and then after that it's just kind of emailing them reminders, especially the ones that don't come to the meetings to pay their dues.
See, we have close to 100 members. We pay dues quarterly, and our dues are $260 a year because it includes our meals that we have, and we have meetings twice a month. We include meals. So a lot of people want to pay quarterly because they come up with $260 at a crack was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have others that want to pay once a year. So trying to keep track of who's paid once a year and who you bill on a quarterly basis, we got to code them a little different in QuickBooks, but it just makes a lot more transactions that have to take place.
Yeah, we just have the $55. That's it.
Okay.
Our club pays dues twice a year. Usually I send out notices in January and July. And single members pay $40 twice per year, $80 total. Couples, $60 twice a year for $120. And some of our members like to pay the whole thing up front in January, which is fine. And others just like to pay separately. So, but the vast majority, like I said, are going to drop me a check off at the Lions meetings, and some will mail them to me. One of the things, as long as we're on that topic of dues and dues notices, Andy, how do you send out your dues notifications? Do you use email? Do you use mail?
Just email.
And Jim, you use QuickBooks to send it out of QuickBooks?
Right, it all gets sent via email out of QuickBooks, yeah.
Yeah. And what I do is I use MailMerge. I put together a document that, let's see if I even have an example here. This is an example of my due statement. I use MailMerge to pull their name in. I use it. I link it to an Excel spreadsheet. It pulls in when their most recent payment was, what their current dues are, and then just a little blurb about what your dues go toward paying. And so I email that out as a PDF to each member so they have an actual statement. Some of them will print that out and enclose their check in it and send it back to me. So certainly just one way of doing it, but not necessarily the fastest or the easiest way to do it, but it's just what works for me. So just wanted to share that. Going back to the previous one about the banking options, I was curious, Andy, if you have any online presence for fundraising. Do you use like a Square website or anything along those lines?
No, we do not.
Yeah, one of the things that we had done as a club about 2 years ago was we investigated ways to take payments online. I watched a video at one of the Lions, I think it was a regional meeting or something, that got me onto Square. And it turns out a number of clubs use Square. It's not only a website that allows you to use credit card payments and deposit those payments directly into your activity account, but it also gives you a website that you can use to send out links or put links on Facebook or Twitter or other social media that will link back to a specific type of bucket, so to speak, for collecting funds. So we identified about 6 or 7 causes that we wanted to support, such as Sharing Resources Worldwide, JDRF. There's a food pantry in town for Verona. And so through the Square website, we are able to create links for donating to those specific causes that we support. And Square charges a very minimal fee. I think it's less than 3% on a transaction. And we felt that that was a reasonable fee for us to use. So if there's any interest in learning more about that, Andy, certainly you can, I can send you some information on that if you wish. Setting up Square takes a little bit of time, but once you are into it, it's really very user-friendly. And we also use it on our phones during brat sales. When we are taking brat payments, we are able to set up a brat meal. So if somebody wants to pay with a credit card and they say, I want a brat meal, we just press the brat meal button. It automatically computes the amount, and we stick their card in, and transaction is done in usually about less than 20 seconds. So it's a real good way for us, especially during COVID, to take payment at those brat sales when people didn't want to handle cash. Jim, do you guys have a fundraising website for your club?
We don't, I mean, we use Square to get transactions, but we don't have a spot where people can just make donations to anything.
Okay,
We have our club website, but we should have something on there. We don't. That's not one of the things we've ever added, but you find many people actually go out there to donate, to make donations, or?
we do. We find especially that during promotions we're doing or putting out flyers or signage or whatever, we've also learned how to create QR codes that we've put on our signs. For example, we used some signage in Verona that Jim Fletcher came up with called Be Kind. And we were selling these Be Kind yard signs for, I think, $10. And one of the things we put on those signs was a QR code. So if somebody took that QR code, it took them right to our Square site where they could donate to a specific cause. And so I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that we've used it to its fullest potential yet, but it certainly gives us a lot of options to be able to get our website out there. And creating the QR codes is free and it's easy, and we can put it on literally anything that we wish and point them right at any given bucket list on our site. If we're supporting JDRF, we can create a JDRF QR code and it takes them right to that Square site. So lots of options. It's kind of, we're just kind of scratching the surface as far as what we probably can do with it.
The Education Foundation I'm with, we use the QR code quite a bit. I actually used it for to collect dues for our homeowners association too. It made it easier so they didn't have to find anything. I sent it in a letter on their bill. Just click on the QR code and make your payment. So it does work pretty easy. People are starting to get used to the QR codes now. So,
Yeah, absolutely. They're everywhere.
yeah.
Any other questions? Andy, any other comments from you?
No, not this time.
Okay, very good. We talked a little bit about sending out dues notices already, email or QuickBooks. The last thing I had on here for the agenda was just what constitutes your treasurer's report during a club meeting. Very briefly, this is an example of mine. I just take a screenshot out of my Excel spreadsheets and throw it on there. I just briefly mention to our members what monies we took in or expended since last meeting and give them the balance. And I usually make a couple of copies of that, pass it around to the various club members. I also email it out as a PDF to anybody in our club in case they couldn't make the meeting, and ask them if they have questions and so forth. How about yourselves? What kinds of reports do you put together?
For us, we really don't. I create an income statement and balance sheet for both the club and the foundation for every meeting. The only information I really give out at the meeting is what our cash balance is in the bank. That's all anybody wants to hear. I've got the copies of the financials if they want to see it. We have one member that occasionally comes up to look at it, but otherwise nobody wants to see it. They just want to know how much cash we have. So.
Well,
Yeah.
the one thing that really surprised me in our club is we had one of our members is a 50+ year member of Lions, Bill Urban, and he said, of all the 50 years I've been a member of Lions, I've never had a treasurer or put together a report like you did. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a nice compliment to hear from a longtime member. I didn't realize that. I just thought this is what everybody did. And so, whether I give too much information or not, it's just what I found that helps me explain where our money is going and how it's coming in and things like that. So,
The very first meeting I was treasurer, when we had it on QuickBooks, I printed out copies to pass around to all the tables so everybody could see it. I immediately got chastised by our members. Don't give out this information. Don't let them see all this stuff. It's like, just give them the cash balance. That's all they want to hear. Don't give them all that. I'm like, oh, okay, well.
I
So
think
I
this
guess every
is,
club is a little different.
yeah, I think this is, but by me doing it this way, it helps at least give the club members a sense that I'm doing due diligence, in the sense of I'm keeping track of every single thing. You know, a lot of times our members will hand me $80 in cash at a meeting, and they'll say, this is for Quick Trip Club, Quick Trip cards, which is what we sell as part of our fundraising, or this is $140 for Bucky Books or whatever. And I want to make sure that they know that I deposited that money in, and I'm accounting for it and so on. So I just kind of do it to cover my butt, so to speak. And I also send this and the bank statements out to our president and our secretary before every meeting. So I'm just kind of covering again my butt and saying, hey, everything's in balance as of today, and this is our balances. This is what I'm going to talk about in our meeting tomorrow night. And that way I'm not inviting any suspicion or anything like that. So that's just generally how I do it. Andy, how about yourself?
For our treasurer's report, similar, they just want to know what's in the balances. So I just give 3 numbers at every account, or everything is our admin balance, our activities balance, and then our checkbook balance.
Okay. Okay, very good.
You know,
I
one
think
of the
that-
things that I implemented when I became treasurer, and it's kind of slid by the wayside a little bit, and we should bring it back, is so many of our fundraisers are almost all in cash. I mean, Lions deals with a lot of cash. People, you know, we get tips at things. Every time somebody was running it, they'd come up with a wad of cash, they'd give it to me. Well, here it's, you know, $380. And I'm like, okay, so I'll sit and count it in front of them. But I actually created a sheet, so they actually had to fill it out with what we had, total it up, sign it, and then I would sign it after I recounted it, just so we had 2 people counting it. Because they were just on trust. Some of them wouldn't even count it. They'd say, well, here's what we got from the till from our bar tonight. Here it is. And I'm like, well, I need somebody to count this. Or somebody's going to say, well, you only deposited 280. I know we had a better night than that. We should have had more money. And I'm like, I don't want anybody with any remote chance of doubt that I'm doing it right. So
Right.
to your point, Steve, it's like you need to have somebody else kind of look at it. It's because we
Yeah.
handle a lot of cash.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I've always been rather detail oriented with it, with mine, and sharing it, like I said, sharing the bank statements with the president, the current president, and the secretary. And whether or not they look at it in any great detail, I don't know, but at least I can say, here's an email record I sent out, and everything was in balance each time. So it's a way for me to go back in my records if I ever need to, and find information that I sent. So
I know long before I joined the club, the treasurer that we had at the club actually had embezzled some money from the club. And they ended up finding out it was like several $1,000s was missing. And
oh my,
everybody got all upset. And I'm like, well, when they started relaying that story to me, I'm like, well, you guys are just as much to fault as he was. Anybody that has no controls and doesn't check them, you're actually tempting that person so you can make an honest person dishonest by doing that. And I said, you don't want to put somebody in that position.
right. The one thing that's interesting about our current president is he's a bank president. So
Oh,
so I know that he probably takes a look at things. And
probably does, yeah.
That's a good thing. So I don't mind doing that at all. So are there any other topics that we wanted to discuss? Andy, any other questions that you might have had related to your reasons for joining tonight?
No, I was told that I needed to, so.
Okay, well, very good. I think we can end our session and say goodnight. Appreciate you joining us. And if there's any other questions we can help with, certainly feel free to reach out. I can put I can put my email in the chat session here and send it out to you. As a matter of fact, I'll just do that right now.
Steve, you are gonna be on the Saturday training, right? Because I can't
That-
make the Saturday.
That is correct. I will be on the
Okay.
Saturday training, so
All right.
I will miss your experience.
Yeah.
I'll probably try to paraphrase you or something.
Just miss having somebody else to talk to.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. All right, well, you guys have a great night and thanks for joining.
All right,
Yeah,
nice
no
meeting
problem.
you,
Thanks
Andy.
for having us.
All right, so long.
Yeah, all right. Bye now.